In the dark and silent reaches of space, far beyond the known borders of the Galactic Council, a lone alien ship drifted like a wounded bird. Its hull was scarred, panels flickered weakly, and the soft hum of its failing engines barely masked the tension inside. The crew of the Zelthar ship, called the Harbinger, moved slowly, their eyes filled with worry and exhaustion. They were a proud species, known for their intelligence and peaceful ways, but now they faced a threat unlike any before. Outside their fragile world, an invisible enemy was creeping closer, a swarm of creatures that devoured everything, leaving only darkness behind. The Zelthar had no weapons strong enough, no shields to stop this terrifying force, and no time left. In the ship's main chamber, Commander Talar stood silently before the communication console. His fingers trembled slightly as he prepared to send a distress signal, a call for help that had not gone out for centuries. He knew it was their last hope. The signal was simple but urgent, a cry into the void, a message hoping to reach any willing ally in the galaxy. But the Council ships were too far, busy with their own battles, and none were close enough to respond quickly. As Talar sent the message, a strange thought crossed his mind. What if no one came? What if this call drifted alone in the vast emptiness? The crew waited anxiously, watching the blinking light that showed the signal's broadcast was active. Days passed and still no reply came. Their hope began to fade, replaced by a cold fear. Then, unexpectedly, the signal reached an unknown destination. Far away, on the other side of the galaxy, aboard the human fleet flagship Endurance, Captain Elena Ward sat in her command chair, her sharp eyes catching the strange alert on the bridge's display. The human fleet had been exploring deep space for months, pushing boundaries and looking for new worlds. Humans had a reputation. Some feared their boldness, others admired their stubborn spirit. Elena knew this signal was different. It was not a simple call for trade or diplomacy. It carried a weight that demanded attention. She quickly ordered the fleet to change course, heading toward the source without hesitation. The crew buzzed with questions, whispering about what they might find. Some feared a trap, others hoped for allies. The distance was vast, but the humans were relentless, their ships powerful and fast. As they neared the coordinates, tension grew. The stars outside the windows stretched and shifted, and a strange silence filled the air, an eerie calm before the storm. Suddenly, the sensors picked up the faint outline of the alien ship, barely holding itself together against the cold emptiness. It was unlike anything the humans had seen, slim, angular, and flickering with strange energy. Elena felt a surge of determination. This was no accident. Someone, somewhere, was counting on them. The fleet formed a protective ring as they approached, ready for any danger. Inside the Zelthar ship, the crew watched the new arrivals with suspicion. They had heard stories of humans, warriors from a distant star system who fought with unyielding will. Some hoped the humans would bring salvation. Others feared they might bring more destruction. Communication was difficult at first. The Zelthar language was complex, filled with sounds and patterns the humans' translators struggled to decode. But slowly, through patient effort, messages began to flow. The Zelthar told of the void creatures, a swarm that consumed stars and planets alike, leaving nothing but silence and cold behind. Their world was next. Elena listened carefully, her mind racing with possibilities. The humans had faced great dangers before, had survived against odds that seemed impossible. Maybe, just maybe, they could help. As the two groups met face to face, a fragile trust began to form. The humans offered their technology, their weapons, and most importantly, their will to fight. The Zelthar, desperate but proud, agreed to work together. Outside, the stars seemed to hold their breath. Something ancient and terrible was coming. But for the first time in a long while, hope flickered like a distant beacon. The question was no longer if help would come, but if it would arrive in time. The human fleet moved steadily toward the Zelthar homeworld, a strange planet orbiting. A dying sun, its skies a dull orange and its surface scarred by centuries of struggle. Captain Elena Ward stood on the bridge of the Endurance, her eyes scanning the vast starfield ahead. her mind alert but cautious. The closer they got, the more the sensors revealed a world in crisis. Seismic activity, electromagnetic storms, and strange bursts of energy that flickered like warnings in the darkness. The Zelthar ships, fragile and few, escorted the humans through the planet's upper atmosphere, their movements nervous but controlled. The humans could feel the tension in the air. The Zelthar people themselves were unlike any species Elena had met. Tall, slender, with translucent skin that shimmered faintly in the dim light of their ships. Their eyes held wisdom but also deep fear. As the human fleet landed on the planet's surface, massive structures loomed. Ancient towers, half-ruined cities, and great domes cracked by time and neglect. The ground beneath their feet was cracked and uneven, the result of relentless earthquakes. And energy bursts from the core of the planet. The Zelthar leaders met with Captain Ward in a large chamber beneath the ruins, where the air was thick and cool. Commander Talar, with a voice steady but low, explained that their world was dying, and not just from natural causes. The void creatures were growing stronger every day, feeding on the planet's energy and spreading darkness across the stars. The humans listened carefully, realizing this threat was unlike any they had faced before. Elena could see the fear in the Zelthar's eyes, the knowledge that their civilization might be wiped out before anyone could save them. Yet, despite this fear, there was a quiet pride and hope that stirred something deep inside the human captain. The Zelthar described the void creatures as massive swarms, creatures without shape or form, made of pure energy and hunger. They moved silently through space, destroying everything in their path, leaving dead stars and empty systems behind. The humans had heard rumors of such things, but never believed they were real. Now, standing in a war room filled with alien maps and flickering holograms, Elena and her officers worked quickly to understand the threat. The Zelthar offered what technology they had left: old weapon systems, energy shields, and data about the creature's weaknesses. Humans shared their own knowledge, advanced tactics, adaptable weaponry, and strategies learned from countless battles on Earth and beyond. Despite the language barrier and cultural differences, the two races found common ground in their will to survive. Still, tension remained. Some Zelthar leaders distrusted the humans, worried their aggressive nature might bring more harm than good. Others feared that humans would take advantage of their desperation. But time was short. Suddenly, an alert shattered the uneasy calm. The void swarm had been detected approaching their star system faster than expected. The humans and Zelthar scrambled to prepare defenses, their voices sharp with urgency. The fleet moved into position, weapons charged and shields raised. The skies darkened as the first shadows of the swarm appeared on the horizon, a swirling mass of light and darkness, shifting and writhing like a living storm. The Zelthar's ancient weapons flared, firing beams of energy that cut through the swarm but only slowed it. Human ships launched fighter squadrons, weaving through the enemy with precision and daring. Explosions lit up the sky, painting a brutal picture of war. Elena felt her heart pound as she directed the battle, knowing that every second counted. The void swarm was unlike any enemy before, resilient, relentless, and hungry. It adapted quickly, changing its shape and strategy with terrifying speed. The Zelthar fought with desperation, their pride forcing them to hold the line. The humans pushed back with boldness and grit, their ships moving as one. The clash seemed endless, the air thick with tension and fear. Yet, amid the chaos, a spark of hope appeared. The combined forces found a weakness, a moment when the swarm's formation faltered. Elena seized the opportunity, ordering a concentrated strike that shattered the enemy's front line. The Zelthar cheered, their spirits lifted for the first time in years. But the battle was far from over. The void creatures began to retreat, but their threat remained. The humans and Zelthar knew this was only the beginning of a long fight for survival. As the dust settled, Elena looked out at the war-torn sky and felt a new resolve grow inside her. They had arrived as strangers, but now they stood together as allies. The fate of the Zelthar world, and perhaps many others, depended on their courage and unity. And somewhere deep in the shadows of space, the true enemy watched and waited for its next move. The quiet after the battle was heavy, almost unnatural, as if the stars themselves were holding their breath, waiting for what would come next. The eye. Human fleet, battered but unbroken, regrouped alongside the Zelthar's fragile ships, their crews weary but determined. Captain Elena Ward paced the bridge of the Endurance, her mind racing with plans and questions. The Zelthar's world was fragile, their defenses barely holding against the Void Swarm, yet the humans were far from home, stretched thin and wary of what else lurked in the darkness beyond. The Zelthar, proud and cautious, watched the humans, closely, their faces a mixture of hope and suspicion. Elena knew she had to earn their trust quickly if they were to stand a chance together. The Zelthar scientists brought data that was both alarming and puzzling. Energy readings from the void creatures suggested they adapted to most known weapons, rendering conventional attacks useless after the first encounter. The humans shared their own technology, adaptive shields and modular weapons systems that could change during battle. But it was more than technology that would win this war. It was understanding and cooperation. For days, teams from both sides worked side by side, exchanging ideas, learning about each other's strengths and weaknesses. The Zelthar taught the humans how to navigate the strange energy fields that surrounded their planet, and the humans showed the Zelthar how to enhance their ships' targeting systems with new AI. Yet, despite progress, old fears simmered beneath the surface. Some Zelthar leaders whispered doubts, warning that humans were too reckless, too aggressive, their hunger for conquest disguised as help. Among the human crew, some officers questioned whether the Zelthar might be hiding secrets about the true nature of the void creatures. But Captain Ward refused to let suspicion divide them. She held council with both her officers and Zelthar leaders, insisting that their survival depended on trust and unity. Then, one night, the uneasy alliance was tested. Sensors on the planet's surface detected an unusual energy spike, something large, fast, and moving directly toward their position. The fleet scrambled into action, weapons powered up and defenses raised. As the unknown approached, the tension was palpable. Every eye was fixed on the view screens, every hand ready at its station. When the source of the signal came into view, it was neither void creature nor Zelthar ship. It was a smaller vessel, badly damaged but alive, carrying a desperate message. From its damaged comm system came a voice, faint but clear, in a language that neither humans nor Zelthar fully understood. They worked together, translating and decoding the message. It was a warning, a call for help from another species caught in the growing shadow of the Void Swarm, one that had fallen under attack and barely escaped. The humans and Zelthar faced a choice: stay and defend a world already at the edge of collapse, or take the fight to the enemy's doorstep, risking everything for a chance to stop the void creatures before they spread further. Captain Ward made the decision without hesitation. They would move forward, not just as allies but as one force, united by a shared enemy and a shared hope. The fleet prepared for a dangerous journey into the unknown, deeper into uncharted space where no rescue ships waited and no help was guaranteed. But the promise of new knowledge, new allies, and a chance to end the threat drove them on. Trust began to grow between the two crews, forged in the heat of battle and the cold silence of space. Soldiers from both races trained together, engineers swapped techniques, and even the children of Zelthar watched human holographic stories of courage and survival, finding new heroes in their distant saviors. Yet, even as hope blossomed, shadows lurked within the alliance. Whispers of old grudges, fears of betrayal, and the weight of centuries of isolation gnawed at the fragile peace. But every challenge only made the humans and Zelthar stronger. They knew the Void Swarm was relentless, and their only chance to survive was to fight as one. The day came when the combined fleet left the safety of the Zelthar system behind, heading toward the distant coordinates in the warning message. As they slipped into the dark void of unknown space, the stars seemed to vanish, swallowed by a creeping darkness that chilled even the bravest souls. The silence was broken only by the steady pulse of engines and the quiet chatter of crews preparing for whatever lay ahead. Elena stood at the bow of the flagship, watching the endless black stretch before them, her heart steady despite the fear gnawing at her. This was a mission beyond any she had known, a test of courage, unity, and hope. The Void Swarm was coming, but so were they, ready to fight, ready to prove that even in the darkest corners of the universe, light could burn brightest when people stood together. As the fleet disappeared into the blackness, an uneasy feeling settled over the command deck, a sense that the true battle was only just beginning. The silence of space was shattered as the first signs of the Void Swarm appeared on the sensors, an endless tide of shifting shadows and flickering lights, moving like a storm without form or mercy. The combined human and Zelthar fleet stood ready, their weapons charged and shields glowing faintly in the dark. Captain Elena Ward stood firm on the bridge of the Endurance, her voice calm but urgent as she gave orders to prepare for battle. The Zelthar commanders, faces tense but resolute, coordinated their ancient weapon systems with the humans' advanced technology. This was the moment they had trained for, but nothing could prepare them for the true horror of the enemy before them. The Void Swarm was not just a mass of creatures. It was a living, shifting nightmare that seemed to flow like liquid darkness, breaking apart and reforming with terrifying speed. Their energy pulsed, draining power from the stars and ships alike. As the swarm closed in, human fighters launched from their carriers, darting through space with skill and courage, striking at the swarm's outer edges. The Zelthar fired long-range beams of concentrated energy, but the swarm absorbed and adapted quickly, countering their attacks with waves of crushing force. Explosions rocked the fleet as ships were torn apart, swallowed by the hungry darkness. The air was thick with tension, fear, and the electric buzz of battle. Elena's heart pounded as she directed maneuvers, dodging energy tendrils that lashed out like whip cracks in the void. The fleet's shields flickered under the relentless assault, and casualties mounted on both sides. The humans fought with a stubbornness born from centuries of struggle, pushing forward even as the enemy's strength threatened to overwhelm them. The Zelthar, proud and fierce, unleashed ancient war cries that echoed through their ships, communication systems refusing to yield their home without a fight. As the battle raged, the crews discovered a pattern in the swarm's movements, a fleeting weakness that appeared just before the creatures reformed. Elena ordered a coordinated strike, combining the precision of human pilots with the raw power of Zelthar weaponry. The attack broke through the swarm's front line, creating a gap that gave the fleet a precious moment of breathing room. Cheers echoed through the ships, a brief spark of hope in the endless darkness. But the swarm was far from defeated. It shifted, changing tactics and attacking from unexpected angles. A massive wave of void energy surged toward the fleet's center, threatening to tear the Endurance apart. Elena acted quickly, ordering a risky maneuver that brought the fleet's experimental shield generators online. The shields flared brilliantly, absorbing the energy wave and saving the flagship from destruction. The Zelthar were amazed by the humans' technology, and the humans gained a deeper respect for the aliens' courage under fire. The battle stretched on for hours, neither side willing to give ground. Crews worked tirelessly to repair damaged ships and tend to the wounded, their exhaustion shadowed only by the fierce determination burning in their eyes. Outside the fleet, the Void Swarm loomed like an endless black sea, hungry and relentless. Yet, through the chaos, a bond had formed, a connection forged in fire and fear. The humans and Zelthar were no longer separate races, but a united force facing an enemy that threatened to swallow them all. As the Void Swarm began a slow retreat, the fleet took stock of their losses and prepared for what would come next. The battle had been brutal, but it was a victory, a sign that even the darkest force could be challenged. Captain Ward stood on the bridge, looking out at the stars now stained with the scars of war, knowing the fight was far from over. The void creatures were clever and adaptable, and the humans and Zelthar would have to be even stronger, faster, and smarter to survive. But in that moment, with the fleet battered but unbroken, hope burned brighter than the distant suns. The first clash had tested them all, and though the price was high, it had proven one undeniable truth. Together, they could stand against the darkness. After the fierce battle, the human and Zelthar fleet gathered in a quiet corner of space, the wounded ships drifting like ghosts among the stars. The silence was heavy, filled with thoughts of loss and hard-won survival. Captain Elena Ward sat in her private quarters, staring at the star charts flickering on the screen, trying to piece together what had happened and what was still to come. The Void Swarm had shown an intelligence that went beyond simple hunger. It adapted quickly, avoided traps, and attacked with a purpose that unsettled even the most experienced officers. The Zelthar scientists and leaders requested a meeting, one that Elena knew would change everything. In the grand chamber beneath the ancient city ruins, Zelthar elders gathered with the human commanders. Their faces were serious, their voices quiet but filled with urgency. Commander Taller spoke first, revealing something the Zelthar had hidden for centuries. The Void Swarm was not a natural force, but a creation of an ancient civilization long lost to time. This civilization had tried to use the Void creatures as weapons, but the experiment went horribly wrong. The creatures broke free and turned against their creators, spreading destruction across galaxies. The Zelthar had hoped the secret would remain buried, but now, with the swarm closing in, they had no choice but to share. Elena listened carefully, realizing this changed everything. The enemy was not just a mindless force of nature, but a weapon, gone rogue, and somewhere out there might be the key to stopping it. The Zelthar elders presented an old map, a star chart that showed a hidden system where the ancient civilization might have left a weapon or technology capable of controlling or destroying the swarm. The catch was clear. The system was deep in enemy territory, a place no ship had returned from in decades. Yet, it was their only hope. Elena faced the hardest decision of her career. To save the Zelthar homeworld and perhaps many others, the humans and Zelthar would have to venture into the heart of darkness, into a trap that could destroy them all. Preparations began immediately. Engineers worked day and night to repair and upgrade the ships. Scientists studied the ancient data, and soldiers trained for the unknown dangers ahead. Trust grew stronger between the humans and Zelthar. But so did the fear. Many whispered about betrayal, about whether the ancient weapon was truly a salvation or a curse waiting to be unleashed. One night, as Elena reviewed the mission plans, her communications officer brought her a secret message intercepted from the Void Swarm itself, an encrypted signal that suggested the swarm might be more than just a weapon gone wrong. It might have a will, a mind, even a reason for its relentless hunger. The message was unclear but chilling. Suddenly, the mission was no longer just about survival, but about understanding an enemy that might be alive in ways no one had imagined. Elena shared the message with Commander Talar and their top scientists, sparking intense debates and long nights of study. As the fleet prepared to jump into the unknown system, a new question hung in the air. Could they truly trust the ancient weapon, or would it bring even greater destruction? The tension was electric. Finally, the day of departure arrived. The combined fleet powered up their engines, shields glowing bright as they made the jump through space, leaving behind the relative safety of the Zelthar system. Stars blurred and twisted around them as they traveled faster than light, their minds filled with hope and fear. When they emerged, they found themselves in a cold, dark system, surrounded by strange, twisted planets and debris from long-forgotten battles. The air in the fleet was thick with anticipation and dread. Sensors picked up faint signals, echoes of the ancient civilization and traces of void energy, hinting at the dangers that awaited. As they moved deeper into the system, strange things began to happen. Ships experienced sudden power failures, communications dropped, and shadows moved at the edge of sensors. The fleet tightened its formation, and the humans and Zelthar worked together to unravel the mysteries of the system. Suddenly, a massive structure appeared on the horizon, an ancient fortress floating in space, covered in strange markings and pulsing with eerie energy. It was the heart of the ancient civilization's secrets, and possibly their salvation or doom. Elena led the fleet cautiously closer, knowing this was the turning point. The Void Swarm seemed to react to the fortress, sending tendrils of energy to attack the ships. but the combined defenses held strong. Inside the fortress, the teams prepared to explore and discover what had been hidden for millennia. The fate of the galaxy hung in the balance, and every step forward revealed more about the secrets buried in the cold dark of space. Trust, courage, and hope would be tested as the humans and Zelthar faced the unknown inside this ancient place, and the true battle for survival was about to begin. The ancient fortress stood like a silent giant in the void, its cracked surface glowing with strange symbols that pulsed slowly, as if breathing in the darkness of space. And as the combined fleet hovered near it, every ship held a strange silence, the kind that came before something terrible or great, something unknown. Captain Elena Ward watched from the bridge of the Endurance, her heart steady but her thoughts filled with doubt. This place was older than any records, untouched for thousands of years, and it was waiting for them, hiding truths no one was prepared for. And when the first landing team was selected, it included both human and Zelthar officers, chosen for their skill, courage, and ability to think quickly in the unknown. And as the small shuttle left the safety of the fleet, drifting slowly toward the fortress gates, everyone watched through the screens, breath held, waiting to see what would happen next. And the moment the shuttle crossed into the shadow of the fortress, every sensor went quiet, every screen flickered, and for a long, cold second, it was as if the shuttle had vanished. But then, the lights came back, weaker but steady, and the voice of Lieutenant Vega came through, shaky but calm, reporting they had landed on a platform near a massive entrance, sealed by a strange door that shimmered like water. And as the crew approached, the door reacted to their presence, opening slowly with a sound like whispering wind, revealing a dark corridor lit only by the pale glow of alien light that ran along the walls like veins, and inside the air was still and heavy, filled with the weight of ancient memories and something else, something alive, watching, waiting. The team moved carefully, every step echoing down the long hallways, weapons ready, minds alert, and soon they came upon rooms filled with machines, some still pulsing with energy, others broken and covered in dust, and on the walls were symbols. None of them could read, but the Zelthar scientist, Relani, recognized patterns, messages, warnings perhaps, left behind by those who had built this place, and deeper inside, they found what looked like a control chamber, a tall, circular room, with a glowing pedestal in the center and strange devices surrounding it like silent guards. And when Relani touched the pedestal, the room came alive, lights spinning, walls shifting, and a voice filled the space, not in words but in thoughts, clear and powerful, like something speaking directly into their minds. And the message it carried was one of desperation, of a last warning. The Void Swarm had once been created here, a living weapon made from pure energy, designed to consume entire stars to end a war that had long been forgotten, but it had turned against its creators and broken free. And now it was growing smarter, learning, evolving, becoming something more than even its makers had feared. And the fortress had been built not as a base but as a prison to contain the heart of the swarm, a core that was still hidden deep inside, pulsing, feeding, calling to its children across the stars. And if the team could reach it, they might be able to destroy it and end the swarm forever. But doing so would require great sacrifice, and the fortress itself would not make it easy, for its defenses were still active, and its purpose was to protect the core at any cost. Elena listened to the reports in silence, knowing what had to be done, and gave the order to send in reinforcements, preparing for a deep entry mission into the fortress core. And as more teams landed and entered the dark halls, strange things began to happen. People saw shadows that weren't there, heard voices whispering names, and felt the cold touch of something ancient brushing against their minds, and some began to doubt what was real, fearing they might lose themselves in the darkness before the enemy even reached them. But still they pushed forward, deeper into the fortress, where gravity twisted and time seemed to slow, where the walls shifted when no one was looking, and where every step felt like walking into a dream that could turn into a nightmare at any moment. And then they found it, the heart chamber, hidden beneath layers of shifting metal and illusion, a vast open space with a black sphere floating in the center, pulsing slowly like a heartbeat, and around it, Fragments of void creatures swirled, pieces broken but alive, drawn to the core like moths to flame, and the energy was so strong it made the air hum and crackle, and everyone who stepped inside felt something deep inside them stir, a fear so ancient it had no name. But they stood their ground, forming a perimeter as R'hllani and the human engineers tried to understand the core's structure, searching for a weakness, a way to destroy it. But then the ground shook, and alarms echoed through the halls as the swarm outside sensed the threat and began to move again, racing across the stars to defend what they had come from, and the countdown had begun. The fleet outside would have to hold the line while the team inside fought to finish the mission, and as ships launched and energy beams lit the void once more, inside the fortress the teams worked faster, placing charges, decoding systems, and fighting back strange creatures that crawled from the shadows, twisted echoes of the swarm that had never left. And through all of it, Elena guided them, her voice calm, her orders clear, as she held the line between hope and despair, and, when the final sequence was ready, R'hllani warned that activating the overload would destroy the core, but also the fortress, and everyone inside. And for a moment, silence held the room, as every team member looked at one another, knowing the choice they faced. But one by one, they nodded, choosing to finish what they had started, to end the nightmare for good. And Elena gave the go-ahead with a steady voice, watching the timer count down, her heart heavy but proud. And, outside, the battle reached its peak, with ships exploding, shields flickering, and every fighter giving everything to buy a few more minutes. And then, from the heart of the fortress, a wave of light burst out, white and pure, sweeping through the void and ripping through the swarm like fire through dry grass, and the core collapsed in on itself, taking the fortress with it. And for a second, all of space held its breath. And then the darkness cracked, and the void swarm vanished, pulled apart from the inside, leaving only silence, broken ships and stunned survivors drifting among the stars, unsure if they had truly won. And when the dust cleared, the Endurance floated quietly, half its systems offline, but Elena was still standing, her eyes fixed on the place where the fortress had been, whispering a quiet thanks to the brave souls who had gone into the darkness and never returned, knowing that their sacrifice had given the galaxy a second chance, and far away, in systems untouched by the war, people would one day hear the story of how humans and aliens stood together in the blackest night and won. The galaxy was quiet after the destruction of the ancient core, and for the first time in what felt like forever, the stars no longer flickered with signs of the void swarm. But even as the survivors of the fleet drifted through space, repairing their ships and mourning their dead, there was a strange feeling in the air, like the silence was too deep, too sudden, and Captain Elena Ward felt it in her bones, a quiet warning that something wasn't over yet, that the swarm had been hurt but not fully destroyed. Reports began to come in from distant outposts, strange readings, energy spikes, flickers of void movement near the edge of known space, and one message, barely decipherable, sent from a small research station on the planet Essera, mentioned something impossible, a second fortress, older than the first, buried deep within the crust of a lifeless world, untouched and forgotten. And when the transmission ended with the sound of screams and static, Elena knew they couldn't ignore it. She gathered the remaining fleet, what was left of the humans and the Zelthar, and they made their way to Essera, a cold, broken world filled with black storms and endless deserts, a place where no one lived and no one should have gone. And, as they entered orbit, scans confirmed it. Under miles of rock and metal, hidden beneath the surface was a massive structure, larger than the first fortress but dormant, sealed tight and surrounded by strange energy fields that bent light and made sensors scream. And it was clear this was not a prison like before, but something worse. Maybe a factory, maybe a nest, or maybe the true heart of the swarm. No one spoke much as the teams prepared to land, everyone remembering the cost of the last mission, the friends lost, the pain still fresh, but they all knew what was at stake. And when the shuttles broke through the thick clouds and landed near a cracked canyon wall where the energy readings were strongest, they saw the top of the hidden fortress, just a sliver of black stone marked with old runes and glowing with dull red light, like a wound in the earth itself. The entrance was found quickly, a sealed door covered in shifting symbols, and this time no key or code would open it. But strangely, when one of the Zelthar, a young translator named Oren, placed his hand on the surface, the door melted open, like wax, revealing a steep ramp that led into complete darkness, and as they descended, lights blinked on by themselves, showing walls covered in carvings, images of the swarm in early stages, blueprints of creatures, notes written in dead languages. And it was clear this place had not been built to contain the swarm, but to create it. The fortress wasn't just old, it was ancient, older than even the Zelthar's oldest records, and the further they went, the clearer it became that the species who built this place had not just made the swarm, but worshipped it, treating it like a god, offering sacrifices, building machines to feed it energy from dying stars. And when the team reached the central chamber, they saw something that chilled their blood, a massive cocoon of black crystal floating above a deep pit, pulsing slowly and surrounded by machines that were still active, drawing power from the planet's core and feeding it into the cocoon like veins into a heart. This was not the same kind of core they had destroyed before. It was growing something new, something larger, stronger, and more aware. And suddenly they realized the truth. The swarm had never been fully destroyed, because this fortress had always been its true source, a hidden birthplace meant to awaken only when the first core was gone, like a second heart beating in silence, waiting for the first to stop. Panic set in as the machines began to hum louder, and the cocoon pulsed faster, reacting to their presence, and Rolani, the Zelthar scientist, quickly studied the controls, finding no off switch, only a countdown, buried deep in the system, just hours until the cocoon would open and release whatever was inside. Elena ordered immediate evacuation and called for all available firepower to be aimed at the fortress, but when the fleet fired, the blasts vanished into the air, absorbed by a strange barrier that spread like smoke across the sky, and the fortress began to shift, its walls changing, opening more passageways, letting out creatures that were half-formed, twisted and aggressive, crawling from vents and ceilings, attacking with claws and shrieks. The teams fought back, using fire and plasma, falling back toward the surface, but the creatures kept coming, and the fortress seemed alive, reacting to every movement, reshaping itself to trap them inside, and Elena, trapped with a small team near the cocoon chamber, realized they wouldn't escape unless they found the main control node and shut the fortress down from within. Rolani believed the node was located beneath the pit under the cocoon, and though it was dangerous, they had no other choice, so they descended down a narrow lift into the lower levels, where the light faded, and even their strongest lamps barely worked. And there they found a strange room, quiet and cold, where a single chair sat facing a screen, and in that chair was a body, ancient, mummified, but still wearing the robes of a high engineer or priest, and the moment they stepped inside, the room came alive, the screen blinking to life, showing old footage of the creators building the swarm, testing it, worshipping it, and in the final image, one of them looking into the camera and whispering one word over and over in a language long dead but clear in its meaning. Awaken. Elena stepped forward and touched the console, and a new screen appeared, showing a control panel with dozens of options, most corrupted, but one button still active, marked with a red symbol that Rolani said meant reset or sacrifice. And the meaning was clear. Pressing it would destroy the fortress from the inside just like before, but this time there would be no escape, not even for the planet. Elena took a breath knowing the price, and just as she reached for the button, her communicator beeped. Oren had found another way, a second panel near the surface, a backup that could delay the awakening by several days, enough time for the fleet to gather more ships and weapons, maybe even enough to destroy the fortress without another suicide mission. But the path to that panel was blocked by creatures in collapsing tunnels, and they would need to split up, one team to hold the enemy back, the other to reach the panel. And Elena chose the hardest path, staying behind with a few soldiers to guard the cocoon, while Oren and Rolani raced to the surface. And as the chamber shook and the cocoon split slightly, releasing a low, deep sound that felt like a voice speaking without words. Elena raised her weapon and waited, knowing that even in the darkest place, she would stand and fight and protect the future of all life. The fortress rumbled like a storm trapped beneath the ground, walls cracking and shifting as the great cocoon above the pit began to open slowly, releasing waves of dark energy that made the air heavy and thick. And in the chamber below, Elena stood with her remaining team, weapons drawn, eyes fixed on the glowing crack that had formed in the heart of the cocoon, from which a strange blue light now poured, flickering like fire and whispering in voices that were not their own. Far above them, Oren and Rolani pushed through broken tunnels and falling stones, fighting past twisted creatures that screamed and crawled from the walls like insects, determined to stop them from reaching the surface panel that could delay the final awakening of the swarm's new form. And every second counted, for the countdown on the console had dropped below 20 minutes, and the energy pulsing through the fortress was rising fast, shaking the ground with each heartbeat of the cocoon. In space, the human and Zelthar fleets circled the planet, waiting, helpless, unable to pierce the shield surrounding the fortress, and Admiral Juno, aboard the damaged carrier Orion, listened to every report with growing tension, knowing that if the surface team failed, they would all face something worse than death. A being born from the void itself, stronger than anything before, intelligent, hungry, and endless. And the hope of stopping it rested on a few brave souls trapped inside, a dying fortress on a dead world. As Elena ordered her team to spread out and hold the entrances, a loud shriek echoed from the walls, and suddenly the chamber filled with movement. Dozens of swarm creatures dropped from the ceiling and climbed out of vents, their black bodies shimmering with strange light. Their eyes glowing red, and without a word, the battle began, plasma bolts lighting up the darkness, fire and metal meeting claw and scream, and in the middle of it all, the cocoon split wider, revealing a shape inside, tall, thin, shifting like smoke. Still forming, but clearly aware, its eyes opening slowly, burning like stars. And it looked at Elena as if it recognized her. And she felt something cold reach into her thoughts, like a shadow pressing against her mind, trying to speak to her, to convince her to stop, to let it live, promising peace, power, understanding. But she shook it off, firing her weapon at the base of the cocoon, though the blast did nothing, just bounced off the dark shell like rain on stone. Meanwhile, Oren reached the upper panel, fingers shaking as he unlocked the old alien interface with help from Rolani, who decoded the final symbols just in time. And with a deep breath, Oren slammed his hand against the activation pad and across. The fortress, lights flickered, machines groaned, and the countdown froze. Delayed by exactly 72 hours, just as the data had promised, and the shield above the fortress flickered, opening small gaps, just wide enough for a focused strike. In orbit, Admiral Juno wasted no time, ordering the superweapon on the Orion to charge and aim for the cracks in the shield, and with a deep hum, the weapon powered up, gathering energy from 3 linked reactors, ready to release a beam strong enough to punch through a moon. And as the final sequence began, the creatures in the fortress screamed, the cocoon shook violently, and the being inside roared, not with sound, but with energy, a wave that threw Elena and her team backward, burning their skin, filling their ears with 1,000 voices crying out in rage and pain. But she stood up again, blood on her face, fire in her eyes, and ordered her team to hold position no matter what. Rolani screamed into the comms, warning that the creature was trying to reinitiate the countdown, using its own power to override the delay, and they had maybe minutes before it succeeded. So Admiral Juno made the call, fire everything now. The Orion's main cannon released a massive beam of white-hot energy that punched through the clouds and cracked the shield like glass, tearing open a hole in the sky. And through that gap came dozens of missiles, plasma torpedoes, and focused railgun shots from every ship in the fleet, slamming into the fortress, shaking it to its core. And for a moment the cocoon screamed, the creature inside flailing, the walls crumbling, fire and light pouring from every crack. And as Elena saw the being weaken, she ran forward, placing the last explosive charge at the base of the cocoon, setting it manually, no timer, just a trigger in her hand. and she looked back at her team, some wounded, some barely standing, and gave them the signal to run, to escape through the crumbling tunnels while she stayed behind to finish it. Oren tried to argue, but there was no time, and they all knew this was how it had to be, so they fled, carrying what little data they had recovered, while Elena stood alone, facing the creature now half-formed, its body shifting between shapes, trying to speak again, offering her mercy, power, peace, anything to survive. But she shook her head, smiled faintly, and pressed the trigger. The explosion tore through the chamber like a star being born, and for a second, the entire planet seemed to shudder. The ground split open, and the fortress collapsed in on itself, burying the cocoon and the being inside beneath miles of fire and stone, and the shield shattered completely, letting the fleet's full firepower rain down to finish the job. When the dust settled, all that remained was a massive crater, glowing faintly, silent, empty, and the energy readings vanished. The void signals ended, and across the galaxy, stars stopped flickering with strange light. Planets once threatened were quiet again, and for the first time, true peace returned. Back on the Orion, Admiral Juno stood in silence, honoring the fallen, including Elena, whose name would be remembered forever, and Oren and R'Lani watched the stars, knowing their people would now live, not in fear, but in freedom, and the alliance between humans and Zelthar, once born of desperation, had become something greater, true unity. They returned to Earth and Zelthar Prime as heroes, not just warriors, but saviors, and the story of the distress signal that started it all was told again and again, not just as a warning, but as a tale of courage, sacrifice, and the power of standing together in the face of the unknown. And though the galaxy would always have shadows, it now had guardians ready to face them. And a new chapter had begun, where humans were not just survivors, but protectors, explorers, and friends to those who had once feared them. And among the stars, a new age rose, an age of peace built on the bravery of those who had gone into the darkness and won.